High Quality Fun podcast. Today we have Chris on, who is going to tell us a little bit about marathon running. Chris and I, we met through his wife, went to high school with me and Chelsea. Chelsea and her are very, very close. And so I got to adopt Chris in that relationship, and now we're buddy. He lives out in Colorado. And has a pretty interesting marathon history, has run all over the country, and we just want to dive into that and share how Chris got into this hobby and hear more about his life. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Tyler.
Yeah, man. Is there anything you want to tell the listeners before we start to peel apart this journey of yours?
No, so like Tyler said, I've known him for 5 years now, maybe a little over 4 or 5 years. And he's been a great friend to me, and met him through my wife, Bronwyn, and it's just been a great journey getting to know him over the last couple of years in Michigan and Colorado. So excited, Tyler, to talk to you today.
Love it. Yeah, we're trying to. Brown and Chris moved out to Colorado, and they've been soaking it up out there as newlyweds. We're trying to get them to move back to Michigan, but if they don't, I do not blame them. Colorado is so much more pretty and beautiful and supports their lifestyle. But yeah, it's also a great place for us to get out, and you guys are always welcome for us and our kids. So, whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so yeah, I'll start off with this. Like you are pretty competitive with your marathon running, and we can dive into, where you're racing, what events you're going to a little bit down the road. But I kind of want to hear how you got into it and, where you are now with your marathon journeys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been running since I was, I think, 7 years old. So I started playing soccer growing up, played on the 7-year-old, 6-year-old, playing local soccer team. I was the fastest one on the field. So my parents said, "Hey, you're just going to start running track." And I remember second grade when I started running track. And I was the fastest kid in the city as a second grader for third grade and under. I ran the half mile, the fastest in the city of Cleveland. And so they said, "Oh, so you're just going to run." So my parents were like, "All right, you're really good at this. You're going to run year round now." So every summer I did Junior Olympics across the country, from ages 7 through probably 12. And then every fall I did local cross country in Cleveland. And then every winter I did Junior Olympic cross country around the country as well. And then in the spring I would do track. So I would run 4 seasons a year, probably from ages.
Was the Junior Olympic, was that was like travel soccer, right? So you did outside of your high school, you did the sport, and that allowed you to travel and race around the state and the country.
So even grade school. So this is like when I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old. What would entail is I'd have to join a team. So I had like a travel team I was on, and then you had to be the top 4 in your event in your state, and then you got to the region, and then you went to regionals, which was like the Midwest region. Then you had to be top 4 in your state top 4 in the region in your event, and then you got to qualify for nationals, which was the Junior Olympics. I had them every year in different cities. So I think in 2000 I went to Disney World. In 2003 they were in Detroit, so I went to Detroit. 2001 I went to Virginia, and that was for track. And then for cross country I went to Missouri in 99. I went to South Carolina in like 2004.
So this means that you were qualifying almost every year.
Yeah. So this is like the way I start. Like, it's a pretty good look into like my running mentality, because I never raced. I never went up for Junior Olympics and didn't qualify. Like every single time I went up for it and like made the choice to go for it, I always made it, which was something when I was young I was super proud of. Like it wasn't like every race I went to I was top 5 seeded. I think I remember going to regionals a couple times where I was like 10th or 9th, but I always made top 4 and I always qualified for Junior Olympics. So that was something from when I was a little kid. I just something about racing just stuck with me, and I was good at running, but I was really good at racing.
Did you have a dedicated coach for all this, or did
did
that change throughout the years?
I did. No, he's a really interesting dude. He was like a really good high school runner, and then he got injured, and then he became like, he legit looked like Santa Claus. He was like super big. He had a big white beard, and he would just coach the local runners. He's coached like a couple Olympians, so he knows his stuff. But he would push us pretty hard. We'd do 5 days a week practice, workouts twice a week, longer runs twice a week, and he was like, he had our best intentions, but he was like kind of scary. Where he was fat and he'd be like, "You want to look like me when you grow up?" And he'd lift his shirt up and he'd have a big belly and be like, "Do the next repeat." And so he'd be like, "All right, we'll do it." Or like if we were walking on our run instead of running, he'd come around in like a truck and he'd catch us and we'd have to run instead of walk. Like we were just little kids, like, like we were like 10 years old, 9 years old. Like it was shocking we were able to focus on a run for 40 minutes. Like, me, I can focus on a run. Like this is me when I was 7 or 8. Like it was shocking.
These are 5K events, right?
No, so I did a half mile and a mile, and then when I was under 3rd grade, I couldn't do more than half a mile.
Okay.
4th grade and above, I did a mile, and then high school I did 5K. And then I did 2 mile as well when I was in like 6th grade. I jumped up to the 2 mile. I was always distance. That was always once I could run the higher distance, I always went for that one.
Okay. Yeah, I did track in high school, and the 800, the half mile, that was almost a sprint. It was just, balls to the wall sprint for 2 laps. People argue the hardest event in the entire track and field. So then you're saying in high school you actually went for the mile and the 2 mile as well?
Yeah, and the 5K. Then I no more 800. Yeah, so like all the way through grade school, it was 800 mile, 2 mile, and then in high school it was just mile, 2 mile, 5K. That was it. Yeah.
So then, after, what'd you do after that? When did you get into doing marathon distances?
So that was after high school. So when I was in high school, when I was doing the 5K, I was still pretty good, but because I ran so much when I was a kid, like mentally I was just burned out by the time I was done with high school. I had some offers to run in college and just turned them down because I just didn't want it anymore. It was like, I look back on it, and when I was a little kid, like training for those races, like mentally pretty exhausting. Like I had to push myself a lot when I was a little kid. And I think by the time I got to high school, I was done. So high school, I finished. College, I didn't run in college. I did some races, but didn't do marathons. It was pretty anti-marathon. And then wasn't until like 4 years after I graduated college that I finally started training and did my first marathon. It took me 4 years after college. So 8 years after I stopped running like super competitively to pick the marathon up again.
Did you maintain the love for running through college though?
Nope.
Oh, you kind of dropped it completely.
Yes, because it was such a big part of my life all through high school, and it was such a big like competitive, like I poured a lot into the competitive side of it, that for me when I was in college, it was like, if I can't be super competitive, I don't want to do it. And so like my freshman year I didn't run. My sophomore year I joined the triathlon team, so I did triathlon sophomore and junior year, but I couldn't really bring myself to be like a competitive runner again in college.
Gotcha. Yeah, I ran track, cross country, and did swimming, so all just endurance events in high school. And when I went to college, running was that was like the one workout I could always find sanity in to stay in shape. That and just like intramural sports, but have not done a marathon. We've talked about this. I'm going to try. It's always been a bucket list item of mine, and I'm getting older. I have kids now. I said, screw it. I'm doing it this May. That means I'll have like a little bit of training in the winter, but for the most part, I will knock it out in the early summer. And yeah, just kind of check that box. But going back to you, like what led you to do the marathon? Was it a bunch of buddies that wanted to sign up with, or?
No, so that's a great question. So I wanted to I started running kind of like you said, it became more of my relationship with it got a lot better when I started working. When I was working, it was like, I don't want this to be my identity. Like, I'm an accountant. Like, I don't want to be Chris the accountant. That was not an identity I wanted. So I knew I was really good at running, and I kind of had this skill I'd tabled for a couple of years. So I started bringing it back. I started running a couple of days a week and just being really casual with it. And then I remember in 2017, I watched the New York Marathon on TV, and an American woman won the New York Marathon. It was like this big, epic, like patriotic thing, and she was like waving the flag afterwards. And I was like, this is really cool. Like, I'm good enough to do this. Like, I need to just do it. And so I remember watching that, being like, all right, I'm done. Like, sitting on the couch. I need to like start doing marathons. Like, I'm good enough. I need to start doing them. And that's why I signed up for the Cleveland Marathon. That was going to be that next May, and then signed up to do the New York Marathon as well. Right after that,
How do you qualify for the New York? Can anybody run the New York?
So you can, yes. So you can. It's a lottery system, but you can qualify with either a half marathon or a marathon time. That's kind of like Boston, but either way, it has a lottery. Like, Boston doesn't have a lottery, but New York does. So I entered the lottery for that, and I ended up getting it. And that was in November 2018, and then May of 2018 I signed up. I was going to do Cleveland, and then that was going to be my goal is to qualify for the Boston Marathon in that race, and then just do New York in the fall, because I'd heard about what the world majors were, and I'm like, oh, this seems like a cool goal. I think I could do this too. So my goals were kind of just to run the world majors and run them fast.
We'll go into the countries or the locations in the world major in a second, but what was the farthest distance you had done at this point? If you're doing, cross country, I assume you did a couple 10-mile days, but have you even ran a half marathon at this point in time?
So gosh, it's a great question. I did 10. I never was like a super long mileage guy in high school. So I think like maybe 12 or 13. 12 maybe was the furthest I'd gone. And then post college, maybe 13, 14, like maybe. There's no run that stands out on my, I mean, one run that stands out in my mind. I remember I was in Detroit and I started running again, and it was a hot day. I remember I ran 10 miles and I had to stop and like get water because I was dying at 10 miles. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I remember that one super vividly. That was like early on in my training where I was like, I want to start running again. So it wasn't any more than like 14 miles. No way. Maybe a half marathon was the first I'd done.
I'm just laughing because I've run a half marathon training for a marathon that I didn't end up doing. I signed up with a bunch of people and they never actually signed up. So I'm like in high school working, training for this thing with no support system. And I finished the half mile day and I'm like, I'm done with this. But so you're saying that you haven't even run a half marathon and you're like, oh, I'm going balls to the wall. We're doing a full marathon. Did it come pretty natural to you? Did you like what went into training for that? Did you have to do a little ego check when you got over that 15-mile mark?
Yeah. I mean, I knew I could put forth an effort for the amount of time I needed to do a marathon, because when I did the triathlons, those were like 3 hours of racing. So I knew my body could at least like race for that long. I had no way to run for that long. But I'm like, all right, mentally, I knew I could like physically race for that. But running, I tried to structure it like I did my 5K training in high school. And I've been running for so long. Like, there's a whole, I don't know if you've heard the whole notion of like 10,000 hours makes you an expert. But the most, like, I'm pretty close to having that with running. So like I like having making training plans, and I've had a lot of coaches and a lot of intel, but it was all for like 5Ks. And so I tried to structure it, and I knew I could perhaps scale it up, just pick people's brains who have run marathons before, try to take what I knew and scale it up to hit distances and like map it out. I remember I had a whiteboard and I mapped out every day for like 3 months of what I was going to do and tried to tailor it, like try to hit every day exactly. And so it was like a really scientific, like a really thoughtful process. The issue was I had never done that type of mileage before, and I didn't know like how taxing it would be. And that's why ultimately I ended up getting a stress fracture like halfway through my training on my first marathon. I knew it was one. It wasn't diagnosed till after the race, but I didn't want to go to the doctor because I knew they would tell me I had one. They'd tell me I'd have to stop running. So I just waited until after the race.
I feel like there's so many stories of people that go to train or sign up for a marathon and have to drop out because of that, because of strain on their body, rolling an ankle, hurting a knee, stress fracture. That's a nightmare of mine. I'm going to be very cautious trying to train for this thing in May so that I can not hurt myself.
Exactly.
So how did unless there's anything else you want to go into with training, how did the actual event go in Ohio? And then, I assume that was quite a bit of a massive difference when you went from Ohio to New York.
Yeah. So I remember the furthest I'd run leading up to Cleveland was I think 22 miles, and I remember that run. It was in Rochester Hills. It was on the Clinton River Trail in Rochester Hills. That's where I did my long runs. And it's this nice flat, like kind of dirt road. And I was able to get. I remember I hit 20 miles really good, and 21 through 22 were really bad. And I was like, oh, whatever. I'll just get through it on race day. And then when I got to race day, I had to take ibuprofen before basically every run. I had to ice my leg every day for like a month. I like did a lot of maintenance just to get to race day. And so I remember because I had the stress fracture on and the stress fracture is not like you can still run it, but run on it, but you have the potential to have more fractures. So it was really stupid, but all in all, I made it. But race day, I remember I just took 2 ibuprofen. I was like, just gut through it. Just as whatever, just go for it. And then I ran really good through the half. One of my buddies from high school came in and rode next to me on a bike. So he carried me through all the way till mile 20. And then sure enough, on mile 20, like hit a pretty bad wall. Had some other friends from high school who jumped in and ran with me, basically carried me. Started cramping up a lot. Like mile 25, I remember like I had to stop because both legs cramped. I had to make it to the finish line. I still ran 2:56, which qualified me for Boston, which is pretty awesome. Like I don't know how I did that, but I remember just looking at my watch and be like, I'm gonna run a 2:40. This is amazing. And then like mile 22 hit, and I was like, I'm so screwed. I don't know how I'm gonna finish this race. And then sure enough, I somehow made it. And that one was just. I mean, I didn't train it as well as I should. I wasn't as smart as I should have been. I should have trained more, done more long runs. Like now looking back, having done 6 and run marathons for 5 years, I can look back and be like, there were some things in training I did that were so dumb. And I would,
you didn't have a trainer
didn't know
or anything. It sounds like you were kind of making up your own.
Myself. Making up my own is exactly right. I made up my own program, thought I was doing the right thing, just running while injured. But I accomplished my goal. My goal was just to qualify for Boston, and I had to run a 3:05 to do that, and I ran 2:56. So that was I met my goal, so that's all I really cared about. And I drove back to Detroit that day.
That's impressive. Literally the first marathon you're qualifying for, Boston. Yeah. I'm just hoping to get below 4 hours. Yeah. I think I can do it based on my running experience, but I'm nowhere near as quick as you. Is it common that people can run alongside you or ride with you? I kind of assumed that your only interaction with them was from the sidelines holding a poster board cheering you on.
No, you can. So in smaller marathons, absolutely. They don't really care, like, because it's called banditing, like a bandit. So like you can bandit a marathon basically at any small one. because you're just running at the end of the day. Like,
Yeah.
and if you're not winning, it isn't for money. It doesn't matter. Like if someone wants to go out, I've bandited someone through a whole half marathon of their full marathon. Like I've just run right next to them for half of it. They don't have to pay. I don't get a medal. I don't get any of the gear. But if I want to go do my long run on a Saturday next to someone in a race, like unless it's a huge operation like New York or Chicago or Boston or something, you're generally fine.
That's cool. I didn't even know that. That makes sense. Bandit, you're just like,
yeah,
robbing them of the experience. I don't know. Getting the experience for free.
Yeah, getting the experience for free. Yeah.
So then you flew out to New York, and this is one of the world majors, right?
It is. It's the first one. That one was in November, and I had found out I got into it in February. So this is before I ever did my first marathon. This is the same year, 2018, and I knew I had a stress fracture. I went to the doctor right after I finished Cleveland. Like, yeah, you have a stress fracture. You can't run for 2 months. And I remember thinking, like, all right, I can't run till August, and New York is in November, so I'm gonna have to train for this thing in like 2 weeks or 2 months. 2 months, which is like typically for a marathon lead up, you need at least 3 to 4 months to like do it properly and not hurt yourself. And so I remember being like, I had to walk around with like an air cast on my leg for a month ish. I couldn't really run. I just did a lot of yoga, swam, and then came back in August and started training again. And it was like really, again, just pieced it together. Couldn't be super smart because I really wanted to run New York, and I was just like, I'm gonna get myself to the starting line and I'll be okay with it. And New York is the best of all the marathons I've done. It's my favorite because it's just a whole experience. Because you start in Staten Island, the whole city is kind of shut down, and you can't get back to the starting line. So everything you take with you, you have to take to the start. So if it's like clothes, you're never going to see them again. So you have to just donate them to the Salvation Army when you're done, because you have to keep warm. The race is until 9. You have to get there at 5 a.m. So you're taking the Staten Island ferry from downtown all the way to Staten Island. Like you're going right by the Statue of Liberty. It's pretty cool. And then you get to Staten Island, like, all right, I have to sit around for 3 hours with nothing to do before the race. It's like it's just a totally different experience. And then race day, you're just running and there's people everywhere. You're just like so overstimulated. It's just, you get to see people everywhere, cool signs, and it's just so much fun. And that's another one where I ran fine, but the last 5 miles or so, I just tanked again, and I ended up cramping like the worst I've ever cramped. Actually, second worst, but it was really. I ended up still going, I think, like 3:08 or something like that, which was still, I was happy with it, but that one was more just for the experience. And I just for fun, I raised money for American Cancer Society and raised like $7,000 or something. I was like one of the top 10 fundraisers. So that was a fun part of it too. Is I didn't even have to, like, 'cause you can run these marathons with a charity if you want. I just decided to do it just because, and ended up raising like a good chunk of money for the Cancer Society. So all in all, that was like a really, really fun time. It was my worst race of all the world majors, my worst time, but the most fun I had.
That's fantastic. For the audience, can you kind of take a step back and explain what the world majors are and if there's any history associated with that? Because I knew that this was a thing, but I don't know anything about them.
Yeah. So it was kind of like a construct of the running community. Like marathoning in general has only been really big for like 40, 50 years. And Boston was always the most prestigious because you could only get in with a time qualifier. And then New York and Chicago were always really big, but it wasn't as prestigious as Boston. So someone came up with the idea. It's actually sponsored by, like, now it's a whole big thing, and it's sponsored by a bunch of companies. The main sponsor is Abbot, who does like testing, like healthcare testing or something. I don't even know. But they banded together like the 6 biggest marathons and was just like, hey, do you guys want to make this like a thing? 3 international, 3 US. We'll make it a goal. Like all these runners, like it's a goal. Like all these people who are running marathons are pretty goal oriented in general. this just gives them like another reason to do these races. And they all the six of the biggest marathons came together. I don't know when. Maybe it was probably within the last 15 years, maybe 20 years. And they said we'll make this a thing. So if you sign up for these six, so it's Boston, Chicago, and New York in the U.S., and then London, Berlin, and Tokyo overseas. And they all banded together and said, we're going to make this a thing where when you volunteer for a race, or when you run our race, you get a check mark. You've done one of the majors. Like all the gear is all like has stuff that says like world major on it. Like it's a branding thing at the end of the day. But if you complete all six, you get like a special medal. That's like, this is, you've like accomplished. It's like the best thing you can accomplish if you're not like a professional runner, in my opinion. It's like, if you're going to be, people have their own goals. Like some people try to do a race in every state, or try to do like, they pick a goal, but the majors is the most competitive goal without being like a professional.
Okay. And what made you decide to do this? Because it literally sounds like you signed up for the New York one on a whim. And
yeah,
like, oh, do New York, might as well qualify for Boston.
Yeah, that was exactly it. It was like, all right, if I can do Boston. So the other thing about these races is every race except for London and Tokyo has a time qualifier element as well as a lottery. So Boston, you can't get in a lottery, you have to time qualify. But for the other ones, it's a lottery system, but if you run a certain time, you can bypass the lottery and get an entry for free. And a lot of those time, and not for free, but you can bypass the lottery and you get it. And so a lot of those races, like if you can get a Boston time qualifier, then you can jump the lottery and get into all the other ones. So it's kind of like the time I ran to qualify for Boston got me into New York and Chicago. So I was like, all right, all I got to do is qualify for Boston, and I could do the 3 world majors. I have a time qualifier to do all 3 in the U.S. And so it became like, I had no idea that's not like what I intended to do. But when I found that out, I'm like, oh, I can do this, and then I just have to do 3 overseas, and I can accomplish this goal.
And how many have you done so far?
So I've done Boston, New York, Chicago, and then I did Berlin last year. So I've exhausted the 4 that you can do with a time qualifier, and then Tokyo and London are the only 2 where you have to do a lottery system. You can't qualify. London won't allow you to unless you're from the UK, and then Tokyo you can time qualify, which I technically got the qualifier for, but they only accept 25 people worldwide under that time. So I wasn't one of the top 25 to get that. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to just figure out. I'm gonna have to just keep entering the lottery for those and figure out when I want to do them. And that's the end of the road. I have a long time to do those 2. So
how does that lottery work? So the only lottery I'm familiar with is like a hunting lottery. So if you buy a bear hunting license in Michigan, and you're pretty much guaranteed not to get it the first 5 or so years, but you acquire points every time you sign up. Yes. You pay for the license, you acquire points every time, and then if you're drawn in that lottery, the more points, the better chance you have. Then I think you can pay, or give them a thumbs up, say, "Yep, I'm going to hunt this year, and thank you for my bear license." Is it similar with marathon running, or is it completely random every year?
It's similar. You don't have to pay. All you do is you just put your email in and you enter the lottery. But you probably have to do it like 5 times to get it. I mean, you can get lucky and just get it on your first try or your second try. Like all you have to do is just keep entering, but your odds get better the more you do it. Like the lottery form, all you need to input is like your name, your email, and then you input if you've entered the lottery before, so that they can track like, all right, this is this person's 3rd time or 4th time. Like, let's bump them up the list. So we'll see what comes of it. for those last two. You can also do a charity. That's another way to bypass the lottery, is you just volunteer with the charity. You have to raise a certain amount of money and you can run. So that's one way I could, if I'm really just like, all right, I'm done with this lottery system, I could just do that.
How many years have you been signing up for those two, Tokyo and London?
London just 2, and then Tokyo I've just done 1. So it could be a longer road if I'm not lucky.
Okay. Is there anything worth bringing up with the Germany race or Chicago or Boston? Maybe we can go into each of those.
Yeah. So Boston was interesting because I missed a start, and that was like a not fun time. I was down there with my parents, and
is it like group starts?
Yes. It's
okay.
A wave start, wave 1 through wave 7 or something. I was wave 1, and it's a similar to New York where it's just a straight line. You start at one point and you end at another, so you can't bring anything with you to start that because you're never gonna be able to get back there. You have to just run with whatever you have. And so my parents in the morning, they drove me to the start. They don't allow any cars at the start. You go to a bus stop and buses take you down to the starting line. And so my parents were like, hey, like, we're running a little bit late. And they're like, hey, we're just going to take you to the start. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you can't do that. Like, you have to go to the buses. They're like, no, then they said, no, we'll just tell them you're running the race. I'm like, all right, we'll see about that. And sure enough, we come down the exit to the starting line.
Okay,
cops
Mom.
are waving. Yeah, cops are waving everyone through. And the cop's like, all right, get back on the highway. My mom's like, you don't understand. Like, my son is running the race. And the cop's like, I've heard this a million times. Like, get back on the road. You got to go back to the bus stop. So we're literally going backtracking a mile. I'm sitting there watching my watch, like being like, all right, my wave just went off. Like, this is great. And so we ended up in traffic. We went down to the bus stop, getting off the exit ramp, and we were in bumper to bumper. So I just got out of the car and started running. And I like tracked down one of the buses and like banged on the door, and they stopped and they're like, we're full. Sorry, we can't let you on. I'm like, dude, I just missed my start. Like, I'll just stand here. Just let me on. And the guy like luckily let me on. And then so I started running through the athlete village to the starting line. I ran through the athlete village and I made it to start with wave 2. And I don't know if you know like NASCAR racing, but you know who Jimmy Johnson is? Like, Jimmy Johnson's a pretty good NASCAR driver. And I remember I got there and they were saying, and now in wave 2, like, give it up for Jimmy Johnson. I'm like, oh my, like he was like standing right there and everyone's like applauding. I'm like, all right, well, at least I got to see Jimmy Johnson by being late. I'm like, I better not lose to Jimmy Johnson. And then so that was really the highlight of Boston. Like, I ran Boston pretty well. It was a pretty good time. But my adrenaline was so shot and I was just like frantic at the start, like having missed it. But that was a good story there.
Did you get to start your clock with wave 2?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
But everyone tracking me was like, I don't run with my phone, so I didn't have my phone for any of this. But everyone tracking me, they had no idea what was going on, because I was supposed to start at wave 1, and then like you can track someone and then like it'll keep them every mile. It'll update you, and I just didn't start. So I had a bunch of people tracking me, like, what's going on? Like, Chris, is he not racing today, or what happened? And then like 10 minutes later, my race started going and people started tracking. So no one knew. I felt pretty bad about that. I'm like, gosh, all these people tracking me are going to be so concerned. And like, I don't have my phone. I have no way to tell them that I'm just starting 10 minutes later. So it was
They probably
like
got it after
weird.
like 5 miles. They just see that your times are coming in consistent.
Exactly.
I wonder if you started late.
Yeah.
Hope you didn't get hit by the bus.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a good thing with Boston. So
was that much different than New York? Because Boston's the most competitive in the world, right? So
it is.
You're probably running with a different caliber of people.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. It is. It's no joke for sure. People there take it super seriously because you have to qualify, and a lot of people, it's there like, and it was for me too. It's like if you're a competitive runner, you want to run Boston, and it's like a really big deal, and people take it super seriously. So it's unfortunate for me. My biggest memory from that is missing the start, but it is what it is.
Have you gone back and done it since then? No redemption race.
No, I bet eventually I will, but I'm sure I'll go through a cycle where that'll become important to me again. But at this point, it's just not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
But
anything worth noting in Chicago? Otherwise, I bet Germany was really cool.
yeah, Chicago was my first race since moving out to Boulder and training. And I joined a team out here and started training with the team out here. And I was doing like workouts twice a week, long runs with a really good team. And I was in really, really good shape and had been acclimated to the altitude for a year. And so that was my PR by about 10 minutes. And that one was an important race for me because one of my uncles, he had like the family marathon record, and it was 2 hours and 47 minutes. That was always a goal of mine. I remember when I was like 7 years old, I remember I was a good runner, but the way I validated it was like, well, I have an uncle who ran 2:47 in the marathon. And I remember that's how I would validate it to people. And I remember being like, I need to beat this time. Otherwise, like, what was the point of me running? If I don't beat this and if I can't be like the standard record setter for my family, then I might as well not even show up. So for me, I remember it being really important for me to break 2:47. And I was on really
Beating
good pace
yourself
to do
down at
so.
7 years old.
I know.
So
I
hard on
know.
yourself.
I know.
Everyone's out there playing with trucks and playing on the playground, and you're just like, you're garbage, Chris.
So that one was really fun because I ran a good time. The last like 3 or 4 miles, I cramped up, but I kept going. The last mile, I remember I was like looking at my watch and I was at 2:40. And I was like, I got to run a 7-minute mile here to beat the time. And I remember just like putting everything I had into that last mile just to do it. And then I crossed the line at 2:46 and some change. And it was just like, so it was so cool. It was like that I had accomplished like the main reason I was running. The second reason I was running marathons was to set the record. And so that was a big deal for me, that race, to be able to set the record. And I set it by like 30 seconds too. It was like right down to the wire.
Is that uncle still alive? Are you able to
He
call him
is.
up and tell him?
He is. I do it more so with my family than him, because like he gave me the classic, oh, really proud of you, like great job. But I know in the back of his mind he was pissed that like, and like and it's like, oh, like you were out there training in Colorado, and like when I was doing it, I was like, didn't train a lot, and I was wearing shoes with holes in it. I'm like, yeah, but whatever. The time's the time. So I was like, but then this segues pretty good into Germany, because then it became like, all right, I need to blow this time out of the water. I need to like destroy this man. So that's what became my like goal for the next year. Because after I did Chicago, I was done with the U.S. majors, and I was like, all right, time to move international. I could get into Berlin, so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do Berlin. This is September 2022. Yeah, September 2022. I had like a really good training cycle. I took it really seriously. Trained for like 3-4 months and was doing workouts 2-3 days a week with the team. Did really good long runs. I switched up my long run training to make it more time based versus mileage based, which is a good suggestion I would give to you and anyone else. That made this run like by far the most satisfying, because I was always married to mileage, and it's like, you got to do a 20-mile run here and an 18-mile run here and blah, blah, blah. And I would go and I would do like a 22-mile run, and I would feel like crap the last 2 miles, but I'd be like, all right, I accomplished a 22-mile run. And then I would get to race day, and I'd realize that doesn't do anything to you, because if you feel like crap at mile 22, you're going to feel like crap miles 23, 24, 25, 26, and it was just fool's gold. And so for me, what I set out to do was like, all right, I'm going to just do my long run for 2 hours and 45 minutes. And so I structured my training that way. I'm like, all right, 8 weeks out, I want to do a 2-hour run. And I did that. The distance was non-consequential. I wanted to hit my pacing well, and I wanted to do the amount of time, and the distance was the distance. And then I did 2:15, and then 2:30, and then I did a 2:45. And I remember when I did the 2:45 run, it ended up being like 25 miles and like 25.2. And I was like running sub 6-minute miles the last one, feeling awesome. And I'm like, all right, this is how it's supposed to feel. Like I remember thinking like, all right, I'm gonna be feeling awesome. And that was a big change for me, was changing it to time based long runs. And that's like the biggest advice I give to any marathoner is do your long runs time based. And if you're going to run 4 hours or 3 hours and 45, like your body is going to be on its feet for 3 hours and 45 minutes. It's going to be on its feet for 4 hours. And so you have to learn like what that feels like. And the distance is inconsequential. Like getting your body ready to run 22 miles isn't going to matter when you have to run 26. So if you can get your body ready to run if you can run 3.5 hours and you're like, all right, at least my body knows it can literally stay on its feet and run for 3.5 hours, then the extra 15 to 30, you can like wrap your head around because you can baseline to that 3:30. But I would recommend that, like, don't try to run a 20-mile run. Try to run for 3 hours and 30 minutes. It ends up being 18 miles, great. It ends up being 21, great. Because the goal on the horizon can't be 20 miles and it can't be 22 miles because it's fool's gold. So for Berlin, I made that a big change in my training, and I ended up running a lot of miles. I was doing like 90, 100-mile weeks while working a full-time job. And still like visiting friends and trying to do a lot of like that. That's one thing in my training I'm really proud of, is that a lot of people I train with, they make it their life. They make running their life, and their friends and their loved ones kind of have to deal with that. And I'm sure Brown will tell you, like, there's days where she's like, dude, you don't need to run. Like, it's a Saturday, you don't need to go run in the morning. But I think I'm pretty good about still fitting running around life. And that's what I'm probably most proud of with Berlin, is like, I was running 100-mile weeks and I was working 60 hours, 50 hours a week. And Brown and I were still hanging out on weekends and going to visit friends. And I was able to structure my training around that. And that's what I'm super proud of, that I was able to do that all together. And so that led to a really, really good training cycle, really good mindset, going into Berlin. And we flew to London beforehand, which was awesome. We spent 4 days in London before the race, and we went to Berlin and raced there. And it was like the best race I ever did. It was 2 hours and 30 minutes, which is like a huge PR. I ended up getting, I think, top like 250 in the field of 50,000. And it was just like an awesome experience. I couldn't.
Top 50 among how many?
So I think it was top two. I don't know what it was. I think it was top 200 or something out of 50,000.
Okay.
It was either top 250 or top 200. And I think it was top 25 Americans, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's impressive. I'm writing down some notes because you went into a lot there, and there's a lot of things I want to peel on.
Yeah, sure.
So I had this podcast episode with Jacob. It was our second one, and he did an adventure race. And it sounds like you've done an adventure race before, so we should dive into that in a little bit. But
yeah,
he had done marathons after college as well, and he told me that he burnt out pretty hard after mile 22 or something. And you've said that consistently with every single one of your races.
Yeah.
And I believe that when you are training, or when you look up like a stock 4-month training program for a marathon, the max you run is something about around 22 miles. Do you why is that? Why is it that your body just gives up? Is it because you're running a further time after that based on your time base, or is it literally you've exhausted every bit of energy that you have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of both. Like physically running 26 miles and just expanding on that, like running for 4 hours or like whatever the amount of time, like that is really hard on your body. So to do that in a training run, it like wipes you out for the week prior. So a lot of plans don't have you going that far because they know that like it's a build up to race day. And if you try to run 26, you're gonna lose out on your next week because your body's gonna be really sore and you're gonna have to get back to normal. So the goal is to do something like 22 to run like a whole week of training before that, and then run 22 on top of that, and then run like the next day, then it's like, all right, my legs are strong. Because knowing on race day, you're on race week, you're going to be running like 4 or 5 miles the whole week, and then you're going to have fresh legs and you're going to run 26. So that's why you do something like 22, because you add that on to your normal running load, and then you're able to run right afterwards. That's like a really good sign to your body that you're getting strong. But then that doesn't help you mentally cope with the fact that like you hit miles 24, 25, 26, like you've never done that before, and it's like a totally different experience a day of. So it's a little bit of a balance, there, that just takes time. And like I didn't really figure out that balance until my sixth race. The sixth race, Berlin, was the only race that I didn't cramp and that I didn't break down in the last couple miles.
And what else is going into that? I have a feeling that those last 5 miles are the worst of the worst, because your body is ready for everything before that.
Yep.
But what goes into race day, right? Like what's your routine? I know that there's probably stuff you're doing during the run, and I know it's probably unique for every single person, but I am curious what you do to psych yourself up and get yourself through those 26 plus miles.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So race day is different for everyone, and it's really the more you do it, the more you can tinker on what's worked and what's not. And this is another one that I didn't really figure out until my sixth one. But for me, it is like eating carbs the whole week of. Like carbo loading the day of is not like the night before is not sustainable. Like you have to keep your carbohydrate levels high for like a consistent period of time. So it's carbohydrates the whole week. It's a lot of like salt supplements, because I would cramp. So I took a lot of salt supplements the whole week before, trying to like stock my body with as much fuel as it has. And then a big change I made was I didn't drink a lot of water. So I used to, and this varies from person to person, but because I'm really prone to cramping, I sweat a lot. So I lose my salt really quickly. So what I would do is the night before I would chug water to kind of lubricate my muscles. And then on race day, I would cramp every time. And so I was like, oh, maybe I can switch this up. And so what I did instead was I drank like just my normal water that I would drink every day, like no more, no less. Morning of, all I ate was a banana, piece of white bread, and a glass of water was all I had the day of the race. And that was a big change for me. It was like typically I would eat like a peanut butter sandwich, drink a cup of coffee, and start pounding water, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to lose water. But in doing so, I was diluting out all my electrolytes, so that I'd pee. My pee would be clear the whole day before and morning of, and I was screwing myself because I was sweating out my electrolytes, and I'd already peed out half of them before the race even started. And so by mile 20, I was already exhausted. I would start cramping. So I switched that this time. I had like my normal diet, like nothing really changed. Then race day was just a glass of water, bread, banana, and then during the race, I have gels that I would train with, like energy gels that worked for me. I did them every 5K. I would take them, and just
Those
like
are pretty much
clockwork. They're just sugar,
carbs, right? You're just trying to give yourself a little bit of energy to get through the next mile or so.
Yep. They're carbs, and it's even when you don't think you need them, it's good to start early. That's another thing I didn't. When my first marathon, I didn't take anything until mile 18, because I didn't think I needed it. And the cliff, like the way I felt at mile 18 versus 21 was insane. Mile 18, I felt like I could conquer my first marathon. I felt like I could conquer the world. I'm like, oh, I'm going to crush this thing. And like 20 minutes later, I was like, this is terrible. My body's dying. Like it comes so fast. And I didn't realize that. And so as I did more marathons, I realized that you just have to take it early, even if you don't want it.
Front load it.
You just need to front load it, because your body needs it, even whether you know it or not.
So you running with a pouch the whole time? I know that there's water throughout the whole event, but do you carry water? And
so I don't.
What else are you carrying?
So I don't carry water. I take every single water stop. I carry water. I take water every water stop. even if it's just to swish it and spit, like every single time, always take it. Gatorade, always take it, even if it's just to swish it and spit. I wear like racing like half tights that have pockets in them, and so I would store 3 gels in one side and 3 gels in another, and that was it. That's all I would do. And then I would just take water every time. That was it. Just store the gels in my shorts. Like my earlier marathons, what I would do is I would safety pin them to my running shorts when I was wearing when I couldn't fit them in my pockets. I would safety pin them in, and then I would just rip them off and take them. Those are my first couple marathons. That's how I did it, so I could carry it but not have to wear like a belt or something. Although wearing a belt is fine. I know a lot of people who do that, that recommend it.
Do you run with music or anything?
So I run with music. I never do a workout with music ever, and I try not to do I try to be intentional about what long runs I do with music versus not. I never race with music. I try to like be totally aware of what's going on. I want to be aware of my body, how it's feeling. I want to be aware of the crowd. Like, to me, racing is such a privilege that I don't want to dilute it out and try to take my mind elsewhere. I want to be like in the moment. That's like a huge thing for me. And so if I were to train my long runs and workouts with music, my brain wouldn't know how to deal with how to race without it. So on my daily runs, like when I'm just running by myself, I always listen to either ebooks or podcasts. So I never even do music anyways. It's always ebooks or podcasts, because growing up, I always ran with people and we would talk. So it's just like my version of being able to talk to someone. So I have someone talking in my ear. And then long runs, I'll do long runs with podcasts or ebooks, but then the ones that I really want to matter, I never listen to anything.
Okay. I have one funny story. So
Sure.
my buddy ran the Free Press Marathon, the Detroit Free Press Marathon, and him and a bunch of people trained for this thing. And race day comes up, he plops his headphones in, and they died. I don't think the battery died. I think the whole thing died. They were almost brand new. And so he had to run the full marathon with nothing in his ears. And, he's not doing it super competitively, but that's how he trained. He always ran his long distances with music. Yeah. And he was so mad. He ended up reaching out to the company that had the headphones and just like,
wow,
pretty much yelling at him. I don't know, not yelling, but just saying how disappointed he was. And then I think they gave him a full refund because of how much that sucked. I could be making that part up, but it cracks me up.
Yeah, no, it's so, the race is so mental that if you switch anything up day of like that, you are screwed. You're so screwed.
I will also say for the listeners that Chris pretty much only listens to one album and one album only with music. So I'm going to say it from my perspective, but he goes to work, and when it's time to focus, he puts in his earbuds and he plays the Tron soundtrack from the newest Tron movie, the one that Daft Punk made. Not on shuffle, can't be on shuffle, from start to finish, and he just brute forces that through his whole workday. And
that's what I really need to lock in.
Yeah, you need to just put that soundtrack in the last 5 miles and just send it home.
I know. That would be a good experiment. I literally, last week, I listened to that album probably 10 times.
The Spotify year in review is going to come out, and Chris will be the top 0.000, the top 99.9999 whatever that listens to Daft Punk.
Without fail.
Without fail. And if he hears it in shuffle, he short circuits and his day's over.
Oh my God.
We joke about this a lot.
Yes.
So that kind of gets you those pills and everything, the sugar pills that get you into mile 20. Is there anything special about those last few miles? It sounds like when you went to the time-based, those last 6+ miles became much easier.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you did or people do to get through that tail end?
Yeah. So I went out a little bit slower, which helped in the first half. And then I also remember looking at my watch at mile 20 and seeing that I was at like not even 2 hours yet. And so mentally, it was a huge boost for me to be like, oh, I've already run 2:45 and I felt great at the end of it. So if what I can do is I can maybe even go a little bit faster here, knowing that I could get in under 2:45. Like my body has the ability to do that. Now I can push it forward. And I remember like being really confident that I could do that because I did that long run that was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And then I remember also, this is like a different thing with Berlin, but it's in Germany. So everything's in kilometers. So that was a big thing for me as well, where instead of having to wait for every mile marker, 10K is 6 miles. So the K markers came much faster. So I was like, all right, I have 10 Ks to go. And then it'd be like, all right, I got 9 to go and then 8 to go. And so I wasn't even paying attention to miles at that point. So it was like a big benefit, because if I had been really mile based, I would have been screwed, because like they weren't super good at putting mile markers out. It was all kilometers. So it was a big mental win for me to be able to not anchor myself to every mile, which your mind grabs onto anything it can at that point to keep going. And it just so happens like you're anchoring to miles is like the easiest way for your brain to like move through it. And that also happens to be like the hardest way, because if you're just anchoring from mile to mile, it can become really hard, because if your body doesn't want to do it, you're on mile 24 and you're trying to tell yourself like, come on, just get to mile 25. And then you're like, well, crap, I got a whole nother mile after that. And my legs feel like crap. Like I'm whatever, I'm just done. It's very easy to just succumb to that. But time based, it's like, if you have
You've already ran that
20,
time, your body can run that time.
Exactly. And then obviously once you get past that time, you're like, all right, I'm past it. But like you can check in with your body, I find like quite a bit better that way. You're like, all right, like I've never run longer than this in my life. How do my legs feel? Like agnostic of being like, oh crap, I have to run 4 more miles. I've never run that much before. Like I've just felt mentally like justifying being able to run for more time. We just do that on a more regular basis. Like think about like in other walks of life. Like if you're going on a hike or something, or it's like, all right, we got like 30 minutes left or something like that. Or if you're biking, like even as a runner, I don't translate a lot of my hard activities into miles, but you do translate a lot of your activities into time. Like even I'm sure you with kids, it's like, all right, like 30 more minutes and then Cora's got to go to bed, or like something like that. Or like, it's just like your brain just associates more with like time-based goals, like time-based initiatives versus miles. Like like when you try to anchor yourself to a mile goal, your brain's going to get rid of that so quick, because you don't do that on a day-to-day basis. So being able to try to switch it to,
I was gonna say, I'm sure that made it so easy, or much easier for you to kind of maintain that social life when you were training for that marathon too, because you need to go out and run 3 hours, right? And if you're getting up early in the morning and trying to knock that out before most people start their day or whatever, then it's much easier for you to still go see friends, still go get dinner at night.
Exactly.
That makes a lot more sense, because you block out a chunk of time to do it.
Exactly.
You're not just saying, I have to go run 20 miles. I don't know when I'll be back. You'll be back at this time.
That's true. That's so big. And it can become like, if you're saying, hey, I got to run 20 miles, it could become really bad. And you're like, it took me 4.5 hours to run that. That sucked. I thought it was going to take me, I was going to do it faster. And it can be a really negative relationship. But if you're saying like, I'm just running this chunk, I'm running 3 hours, I'll be home in 3 hours, and I'm going to be happy with whatever I do in that time, it's just like a much healthier relationship, I find.
I like that. I mean, yeah, because you just said it. I mean, we have 2 young kids, and I looked at Chelsea. I'm like, hey, I need to do this. It's a bucket list item. She's like, just do it. Stop talking about it. Sign up for May, get it done. And, if I can get myself up in the morning, or even, I mean, we talked about it. I have a Peloton alternative, right?
Yeah.
Even if I put the time in on that bike, I could sit there after the girls go down or early in the morning and still be present in case the kids need something. So that's great. That's something I need to figure out whenever I actually start prepping for this thing. It'll probably be February. I'll have the plan set up and just say, all right, let's do it. And then Coach Chris will have to guide me through it all.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you brought the bike up, because that's another way that time just is easier to translate. Because like it's, who knows what the translation is between like a bike mile and a running mile? Who knows? But if you've done an hour of work, like if it just snowed the night before, or like, you know, you've had a tough day with the kids, you can't get out to run, like just to get on the bike and still do an hour of work, you can go to bed feeling like, all right, like I accomplished my goal for the day. Like instead of saying like, crap, I didn't run my plan said I had to run 6 miles. I didn't run 6 miles. Now I'm 6 miles behind on the week. Now I'm screwed. Like it's just, there's so many ways you can, like, it can be a positive and a negative. Like if you hit all those marks, you're like, this is awesome, I'm knocking this out of the park. But it's hard. Like you can find ways to make it more manageable. And time-based training, I think, is a way that you can really make it work. And it's really all about, you'll find this when you train, like it's just, there's like literally it comes down to two things: it's just pain tolerance and priorities. Like if you can make it a priority to get your hour of work in work in a day, be it on the bike or on running, you can prioritize an hour, and like it's not too painful, and you can getting up at 5 a.m. if you have to, or 6 a.m. if you have to do it. If you can tolerate that, you can do anything. Like it's easy. If you can just bank that, or you can do it at night or whenever you can do it, as long as you carve out the time to prioritize, you can easily do it. It's so much more manageable if you just say, I'm gonna carve out, it's my hour, I gotta do an hour a day, 5 days a week, at least an hour of like activity. That's 5 hours in a week. Like if you can prioritize 5 hours in a week, you can run a marathon.
Oh, I got this. No, it will be a lot more interesting with the kiddos, but I think
100%.
I think I'll be able to do it. We have a pretty good work-life balance, so if I can just go to bed on time, get up early, get it done before the girls are up, I think I'll be all right. I'm excited. I'm nervous, but I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I would give you as advice, that it kind of goes into my Tron, like this like my whole thing, how I listen to Tron, is if you can find one route around your house that's like 4 miles or 6 miles or 8 miles. If you can find one route that you're like, I'm guaranteed I can get this in, there's not a ton of like traffic, and you can do that like 3 days a week, that is so big, because mentally it's hard to go out and be like, all right, I'm gonna run a new route every day. And it might seem like this is like, it's super like, it might seem like it's super monotonous and it's like super boring, but like when you have to get out of bed at 6 a.m. and you have to like get your shoes on and you have to figure out everything else that's going on in your day, the rest of the day, if you don't have to make a choice about what route you're going to run, that makes the training cycle so much easier. Like I run the same route when I'm on my own, like 3 days a week. I run the same route, and I've been doing that for like 4 years. And it is a little bit psycho, I'll acknowledge that, but like I still have a smile on my face every time I'm doing that route. I'm able to focus on something else, like my whatever I'm listening to or how my body's feeling. Like I don't have to think about, I'm going to make up a new route today. And some people love doing that. That's just not me. I just don't want to expend the mental energy to have to find a new route.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit out in the boonies. Like we live on dirt roads. I don't have, the ability to run all these city streets. So there is a 4-mile loop that I enjoy, and I just have to figure out a larger one for the next thing.
Just find out a way. Just find out a way that you can add on like a mile and like 2 miles. I do the same thing whenever I stay at Bronwyn's house. Like there's a 6-mile loop and an 8-mile loop. Just have to take an extra dirt road, and so I figure out which one I want to do that day, and I go do it.
Okay. So one thing that I don't know if you know anything about this, but we were doing keto for a while.
Yeah.
And we still do pretty good. We try to eat very low carb at home. If we're out at a restaurant or we come over to someone's house and they feed us, it's a little bit different, but we try to eat pretty low carb. And I remember in one of these podcast episodes that I was listening to, they were saying, I mean, you burn carbs so much quicker than you burn fat. If you're in ketosis, you're living off fat and you are storing that fat to be burnt later. When you're most of the American diet, you're not in ketosis, you're living off of carbs.
That's right.
And so when you're running in a marathon, you are doing that carb load a week before. You're eating all the spaghetti and pasta and everything, and then your white bread the day before, and you're taking those sugar pills during the day of, just so you have a little bit to burn towards the tail end. Have you looked into anything with ketosis and running marathons? Because my understanding, it's a slower burn. If you have it built up, then a lot of that is unnecessary. But I've not heard a marathon runner talk about it. So
it really is person to person. I know people who do ultra marathons, like 50-mile runs that you're on your feet for like 6 hours, 8 hours. They all are like fat heavy diets, more so than carbs. Like, I think it sounds really crazy to say this, but like marathons are still, in like the vast scheme of running, like they're still like kind of a short distance. And I know that sounds really crazy to think about, but the people who train for marathons are training for speed. Like the guy, like my per mile on my fastest marathon was 5:45. Like that is not, I still can't believe that for me, but like that is you're running fast. Like you're getting really fast turnover. Like your body is moving at really fast, efficient pace. Whereas people who do like the longer 50-mile trail runs, like you're just running. Like your body is doing more. Like it has to, it can store things that can be released a little bit slower. Whereas for marathoning, like you got to get in and get out. Like your body's churning through fuel, like churning through it. And so I know there's some runners, like everyone's different. Like I know runners who really are more fat heavy. The team I run with in Boulder, they're very much more carb focused. And I always grew up with being more carb focused, but I'm never been one to tell someone like what to do with their diet, like running really ever. Like I for me, it's really been like just eat healthy and get your mind right. And there's like a really good quote from this runner, Frank Shorter, who's like one of the most accomplished American marathoners. And someone asked him that, and he was like, I run my race with my legs, not my stomach. And that's something that always stuck with me, is like, that's pretty badass. Like they were trying to be like, Frank, what do you do when you run? And he's like, I don't care. I don't run with my stomach. So that's one thing where I've kind of taken that to heart, where it's like, if I don't prepare my legs and my mind for race day, it doesn't matter. I could eat carb heavy or fat heavy. I'm still not gonna race my best if my legs and my mind aren't ready.
I like that. I like that you pulled it into longer runs, right?
Yeah.
When you're running off a carb fuel source, you pretty much have to have those sugar pills, though, because you are depleting that so quickly.
You have to. Exactly.
Yeah. But the way you kind of explained it is maybe fat is a slower burn, whereas carbs, you can kind of just rip through it and it might be a quicker fuel source. And I know it's so complicated. I don't know enough about diet, but that's just something that I've wanted to ask you for a minute.
I mean, realistically, if that's a diet that it's all about what you train with. Like the biggest mistake you can make is like, I'm going to live my life keto, and then just because of marathoning, I'm going to switch. And then and then your body's got to figure out what to do. Like that's another thing, is just do whatever you're most comfortable with. I mean, obviously, if you want to change your diet, like if you're going to race in May, start in January and start getting your body ready. But I tell you, I was early on in my marathon career, and when I talk to people early on in their marathon, they ask me this all the time, and they're like, what should I have the week of? Like, what should I have the night of? And that's such a common question. And it really is like, if that is your biggest concern, like you are screwed, because there's never been a single person who has been like, I'm just going to train like whatever, but I'm going to knock out my pre-race meal and I'm going to run a PR. Like that has never been, that's never happened ever. So it's important, like to get your nutrition down is important, but it has to be part of your whole plan. Like whatever, if you go run a 3-hour run and you're saying, I'm going to do my 3-hour training run, that's where you can play with it and be like, when did I feel good there? And be like, if I had a, if you're just like, hey, I had a long week and I had a tough morning, and for dinner last night we ate leftover pizza, and I'm still doing this 3-hour run and I made it. Like, you're like, all right, well, I still did it then. Like, race day shouldn't be any different. Like, you were able to do, like, the race day, really, the joy of the marathon is not the race. It's the journey up, going up to it. Like, it's a way to get into shape. It's a way to, like, experiment with this kind of stuff. Like, the race day, like, I've raced 1,000 times in my life. Maybe 10% of them I've finished and been like, this was awesome. But I can tell you, every single time the training was fun and the training was enjoyable. So that's where you can really lean in and be like, all right, I have a 3-hour training run. I wasn't able to prioritize my nutrition this week. Like, let's see how this goes. And then if something doesn't work, it's like, all right, like, I know I really got to change something here. But if you typically I know you typically eat keto and you're a healthy dude. So, like, I would just stick with what you know. And if you find like you're getting gassed on runs, and it's like, all right, well, maybe I need to change something.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of a good transition. You gave me some reflections, right? It's about the journey, not so much the event. How has doing marathons kind of changed you? Is there any major mental strides you've had or philosophy changes? I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, it's really, it was like, I don't have kids, and Brown and I just got married, so um it was really important for me to have that as like my thing that I do really well, because, like I said, like, I didn't want my life to be my job, and unless I found some other thing to hang my hat on, that's what it was going to be. Or I was just going to be like that fun dude who's an accountant. Like, I wanted to have something more. And so it changed my mindset of like, if I want to do this, I want to be really good at this. Like, I can't just walk into it. I need to really try. So it was a shift in mindset of like getting up really early and prioritizing workouts and prioritizing long runs and making it like, I'll just keep saying priority, but making it a priority was so massive, and like being intentional about it. But then it changed my mindset into like, I can fit this into my life. Like, I'll still go out. Like, there's times where I'll go out with my friends. If I have a friend in town and I'm supposed to have a long run on Saturday, like, I'll still go out with them on Friday, and I might feel like crap Saturday morning, but I'll still get the run in. And being able to toe that line of like, hey, we want to see, like, example, like, we want to see Tyler and Chelsea in Detroit, and I'm supposed to have a long run on Sunday. Like, I'm not going to sacrifice seeing you guys for the long run. I'll just do the long run on Wednesday or something like that. Like, it became a big shift in mindset of like, I can try to be really good at something, but I don't want to be that guy. And these guys exist everywhere where like it's their whole life. So it changed my mindset quite a bit. Like, I can do things and be good at them without making it my whole life.
Anybody who has routine at the like core of their day, I feel like just excels at everything else. I remember when Chelsea and I were working out before work, before kids, and having that workout done by the time you get into the office, you're still getting to the office before everybody else, was the greatest feeling. And I
Awesome.
never felt like more in control of things.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And I can't even imagine doing that when you have a, 2-3 hour workout, and, you're still working 50 plus hours a week.
But you can do it. You can do it.
I got this. We got this. So what's the next goal, right? You're kind of just waiting for that lottery, but as far as I know, you're still running quite a bit. What are you doing to, like, what's your maintenance for now? Is it just to stay in shape? Are you still trying to keep miles up? Are you still sprinkling marathons in here and there?
Yeah, great question. So after Berlin, I was so happy with that time. I kind of just started running a little bit. Like, like, running for me is, I can do 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and I'll be happy. And then get an hour plus run in on the weekend, and I'm pretty happy. And so that's kind of where I was living until maybe July. And then I signed up for a race that, it's next weekend in Sacramento. It was a marathon. And I was going to ramp up my training, and I wanted to beat 230 and wanted to PR again. Like, that's the reason I do it, is I want to PR. And so I was really going to start working out hard, and I got up to some high mileage. And then like August came around, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I just, it's like something went off my head of like, dude, you do not want to do this. And then I remember thinking, like, I hadn't put the time and the effort in by August to really challenge my time in Berlin. So I was going to go into it pretty confident I wasn't going to PR. And it was a race in Sacramento that I didn't really want to go to Sacramento. And so I remember I was talking to Brian. I'm like, I just don't want to do it. Like, I can continue staying in shape. And it was like a pretty clear sign. And maybe, I'll look back, 5 years from now and be like, I was in really good shape. I should have pressed it and potentially PR'd again. But at the moment, it was just like, I made a decision about a month ago to just not run the race. It just wasn't important for me. It wasn't a priority for me. And I just didn't want it. So now I'm still just back to doing like 3-4 runs a week. I'm able to really like prioritize time with family and friends, and don't have to worry about getting runs in. So for now, I'll probably just keep looking out at London and Tokyo, but I may throw another race in if I get an itch in the next year or two, if I don't get those. But for now, I think that's the goal in my head of marathon running and why I want to do it. Those two races are really all I have right now.
I like that. Maybe I'll con you into coming and run one in Michigan
Yeah.
for me, or banding it for me.
Yeah, I'll band it for you. Yeah.
It'll just be
That's a great
walk
excuse.
No. No, that's great. Yeah, you are always persistent from what I've seen, whether you have a race coming up or not. So I love that you still put the time in and get those runs in, and I'm sure it helps keep you sane through work and normal life, and just having that run as an outlet.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I think that's honestly a great spot to wrap all this up. I got through pretty much everything I wanted to. Oh no, I do want to tell this one story, and then we can wrap it up. So I have actually done a marathon.
You have? You told me this
I think
before?
we've talked about this. So I was training for that marathon that I dropped out of. I got through the 14-mile day. So I've run a half a marathon training for a marathon, and then I quit. And then I found out I was a big longboarder. And I found out there was a push marathon maybe a month later. And a push marathon is essentially a marathon that you do on a skateboard or a longboard. I was like, oh, I trained for half of a marathon, and as long as I keep up my endurance, I can do this thing. And so I went to Grand Rapids, which was on the west side of Michigan, and I did this push marathon. And the thing that I didn't have was I could push with one foot and stand on the other foot, but I could not swap them very well. So I tried to practice that going into it, but I was not very good.
Oh.
So I pushed 26.2 miles, and
what the hell? Did you cramp up?
It was a very, what's that?
Did you cramp up?
I was going to say by the end, I stepped off that board and my calf on one foot was pretty much blown out. My hamstring on the other foot was blown out.
Oh my God.
Goofy ass limp right after that. But that was very cool. Just a very unique thing, just pushing this loop through a metro park with all these people that are really into longboarding.
That's pretty cool.
It was fun. Just an interesting story. I need to get somebody on here to talk about longboarding at some point. But yeah, so is there anything else you want to say to the listeners before we wrap it up?
No, I think, running is it's a privilege. It's something that we all can do. We have two legs. Tyler knows I'm a small guy. I'm not really big. I just have developed an ability to move my legs fast, and mentally I can push through. So running, just in general, for anyone, I would just encourage you to try to do it. And signing up for a race is not about the race; it's about the journey there. So if you can embrace that, that's how you'll succeed.
Yeah, and even start small. If you've never done a race, do a
Yep.
5K, do a mile.
Yep.
They have
Start
some
small.
fun 5Ks out there.
Exactly.
Well, all right, Chris. Thank you for coming on. I had a great time talking with you, and looking forward to getting this out there.
You too. Thanks, Tyler.